because I've been writing a book, my third book in the background, which is all about leadership and particularly about what I call self-leadership. And in trying to write it, I've really struggled, and I've just decided that I probably need to write it out loud. So I think the best thing I could do was to start throwing content out there and getting some sense back from you of what feels like it resonates for you. Oh God, I hate that word, resonate. What actually floats your boat and what you think sounds like a load of shite. But what I want to share with you today, if you like, is one idea that's been around for quite a long while. I wish I could take the credit for the actual metaphor that I'm going to talk to you through today, but I can't. But what I can do is I can relate it to some of my own experiences in the corporate career, and particularly when it comes to what it means to take a position of leadership in a company. Now, fundamentally, I don't really think leadership is something you learn. And I've been on all sorts of leadership development programs in the corporate world, lots of training since I became self-employed as well. And I think leadership is a position that you hold. It's a way you show up that determines whether you're a leader or not. And this finally got nailed for me when I was reading Steve Jobs' autobiography, because by any leadership model or leadership standard, that guy was a cock. It was a very nasty kind of piece of work in some aspects of how he operated. And yet he went on to build what is probably the most important company of his generation. And that was kind of signaling to me that this kind of idea of leadership, we try to teach leadership and train leadership, but actually when people just operate from the right position, the best way they have of showing up, that kind of leadership position emerges. And I can't think of a better metaphor than this one, which is the diamond, the horseshit, and the nail varnish. So I've heard this story from several different coaches over the years, and hopefully I can bring my own experience to give my sense of it. So the idea is that we all start off as a diamond. We all start off as pretty cool and pretty everything we need as children. So I'm just bending down, pick up a bit of paper here. So we started off fine. Now, for me, fine meant I was quite a chatty, talkative young kid. I'd stand at the front gate and talk to people as they went past. I was a bit challenging, I think, maybe a little bit opinionated, and I think quite funny as a child. And it was a great way for me to show up. But then I began to learn stuff about myself as a child, and then on into my parent, when I became an adult, I began to learn some stuff about myself. And I also began to learn some stuff about how the world is and how I fit into the world. I was told to shut up a lot by my mother. I was told that I was too talkative. At school, I was told I was clever, but I was too disruptive and always interfering and interrupting with others. And by the time I got to work, in the early days of my career, I was fine. But once I started to take positions of authority, I began to suffer with what psychologists refer to as imposter syndrome. So imposter syndrome is not a recognized cognitive bias, but it is widely recognized as a sort of behavioral trait that some people suffer with. And imposter syndrome is where you think you kind of have a sense that you've kind of overstepped the mark, that you've got to a level where you're not supposed to be, and that at some point you're going to get caught out. And all through my corporate career, I struggled with this idea that I'm not good enough. Morning, Ian. Hope you're well, buddy. And so who I truly was suddenly became hidden, and I became who I thought I was. I assumed a whole load of thinking about myself, and it really used to affect me in my working life, and also it's probably affected a good first half of my business coaching career as well. This idea that, that who am I to go and tell these business owners how to run their business? And it was only when they sort of began to sort of feed back to me that the information I was holding was really valuable to them, that it began to kind of make sense. So I covered this diamond, this perfect version of me, in a bunch of horse shit. So I replaced who I truly am with who I thought I am. And I began to behave like that in the world. And then at some point, I began to feel a little bit not enough. You know, I felt inadequate. I felt like I wasn't I wasn't the person I wanted to be. So what I used to do is I began to model myself on others. I remember when I worked at Tesco's, there was a guy that worked in the inventory management area who was a really, really well respected in the business, and probably a subject matter expert, you know, a national subject matter expert on inventory management. And I used to kind of model his behaviors, thinking that if I could just be a bit more like him, then I'll be really clever. And that's a pattern that I attached throughout my whole career. I tried to copy people. Even when I became a business coach with Action Coach initially, I used to think, right, I just need to model what Brad Sugars is like, or I need to model the most successful coaches. So instead of chipping away at some of that horse shit, what I actually did, I started to paint over it. I started to create this identity of who I thought I was supposed to be. And that was where I applied the nail varnish over the horse shit. And all the time, in the middle of all of that shit and nail varnish, is the perfect best expression of me, and the person who is the best possible leader that I'm able to be. So I'm asking you a question today, really. What about you? You know, when you show up, are you showing up as the you truly are? Or are you showing up in the horse shit or in the or with the nail varnish? You know, I can see it with some of my clients. I can see that they limit their possibilities and they limit their sense of themselves by this identity that they've created. And I think it's pretty unhelpful. So drop me some comments. What's your thoughts around the diamond, the horse shit, and the nail varnish? And do you recognize that sometimes that you're not as functional as you could be if you just showed up as you truly are? Just going to grab a cup of tea there. Yeah, exactly. So you know, I think this is at the heart of performance, because what I know is that the people that I work with that really perform supremely well are able to operate beyond this story, beyond this narrative that they're holding on to, that they can see past the cracks, if you like, the cracks in the fabric of their reality. And they can see that even though they don't always, their thinking doesn't always support them and back them, that they can operate in spite of that. And so for me, it's really, when I come to running the programs that I run now, the leadership development programs and the programs for business owners, my first priority. So Ian, yeah, you know, still suffer from imposter syndrome now. And, you know, Ian, I know a bit about your story, and we all get it. You know, we all feel it. And I think sometimes the worst thing we can do is to overthink that and try to think around it, or try to create a positive mind state. Or, you know, I'm not a big fan of anything like affirmations or any of these types of things, unless you first understand that it's just a piece of thinking. And I've found that I can detach myself from my imposter syndrome now and look at myself remotely and see how ridiculous I sound when I hear myself. And Darren, you know, from my experience, there are times when I think I've seen the diamond only to find another level of nail varnish. Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that, because that's exactly my experience as well. Whenever I think I've got back to who I truly am, there's something else that nags away at me. So I'm a bit like you, Darren. I wonder if I ever come to the end of this journey. And I think that's the same for all of us. But you know, Ian, yes. So look, here's the thing: if the imposter syndrome helps you, then I guess you might use it as a tool. But I think the difference is to know it for what it is, rather than to assume it has some meaning and some reality, because it crippled me in the corporate world. You know, in the corporate world, I began to show up as very dysfunctional, kind of almost aggressive at times, very confrontational. And that isn't me. That's not me by my nature. That was just me trying to hide my fear of being discovered as a fraud, as an imposter. And the way I first began to see past this was an exercise, which I'm going to talk about in another Facebook Live at some point in time, where I suddenly and quite dramatically saw for the first time that wasn't me. That identity I held, that story I held, actually wasn't me. And the me in the conversation was far more potential than that. And that's the first time I caught a glimpse of the diamond. But you know, like you mentioned there, Darren, we all keep finding our way. You know, we think we're there, and then we realize, oh no, that's horse shit too. You know, for me, the horse shit is answering three key questions of me. It's asking me, it's informing me of three things. It's informing me of who I think I am. It's informing me of what I think I want. And it's informing me of how I think the world works. None of which is necessarily true. It's all just that story, that representation in my mind. So, Ian, you know, you're absolutely right. That's the key. The key is recognizing it for what it is. Recognizing that what is present is a layer of thinking, and I can operate in spite of that. And I found that it's taking action in spite of that level of thinking. The feedback I get from that action then almost diminishes the thinking and the sense of imposter syndrome. So the trap, if you like, becomes the inaction as a result of the thinking. So if I don't do something I know is going to be good for me or good for my business because of imposter syndrome, that's the trap. But if I can operate in spite of that, I find the feedback I then get into the system reinforces the sense of how powerful I am as the diamond in the metaphor. So I wanted to share that idea with you today because it kind of sits in the middle of the work that I'm doing and the writing that I'm doing, along with some other ideas which I'll share. But I'm really grateful for your contributions today, and for you listening in. And keep your eyes out. If there's one thing you can do, a couple of things actually. If you haven't done so already, then like the 6th Sense business page, because that's where you'll get access to when I'm going live and the content I'm going to begin to start throwing out there now. And if you're really interested in understanding your performance in the commercial world, then you can join my group on Facebook or LinkedIn. The group's called the League of Superhero Business Leaders, and it operates in LinkedIn and in Facebook. So just go in and search for the group and come on and join me, and come and join this debate about what it takes to just show up at our very best and to be the best leaders we can be. So I'm going to bring it to a close there. If you've got any final comments, I'd love to hear them. I hope that's been in some way helpful. I find just talking about this stuff is helping me think about the ideas in the book and how the ideas in the book will come across. But I wanted to share. I wanted to share that. So don't forget to click the bell so you get notified whenever DG is going live here. Yeah? So I didn't even know there was a bell. So thanks, Dave. Hey, Ian, always a pleasure. Well overdue for a visit down to you. I've actually got a client in Gosport, so maybe next time I'm down to see them, we can have another one of our great debates. Hey, maybe we could even do a Facebook Live together, and you, Darren, as well, for that matter. So, hey, I hope you guys have had something of value here today, and I will speak to you all again soon. Have a really powerful week, and just try to operate just that bit outside the horseshit and outside the nail varnish. Just try to just show up as we really are, and I think we'll begin to notice the difference quite markedly. Good stuff, everyone. I will catch up with you soon. And don't forget to like Sixth Sense business page and to join the group, the League of Superhero Business Leaders. I'll catch up with you all soon. Have a fabulous week.